Imagine trying to teach a history course that covers every event from the past, starting with the Big Bang up through the moment that you, hopefully, click subscribe to this channel. Do it. A class that long with that many details would be impossible to cover in 3,000 videos, let alone 35. But it also wouldn't really be a history course, because history and the past are not the same thing. The past is every single thing that has ever happened. Like, ever. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage, the Silk Road, and yes, that awkward Facebook post of you and your grandma when you graduated from middle school. Everything. The past can be dusty, dirty, and remind you of the marked up and stained textbooks your teacher made you memorize. Also, what was that stain? Why was it stained? Anyway, all of these dates and facts and just stuff to memorize, it's basically everything you've been taught to hate about this kind of course. But history is much more than dates and facts. It's a dynamic field of study that seeks to unearth what happened, why it happened, and why it matters today. Think of it this way. Imagine an interviewer asks, "Tell me about yourself." Do you like sports? Maybe you tell the interviewer about the first football game you ever went to. Like movies? Maybe you tell the interviewer about how you still cry at the end of Titanic. Or the fact that, come on, there was plenty of room for both Jack and Rose on that door. Like history? Maybe you tell the interviewer about a totally awesome YouTube series featuring a brilliant and engaging host who brings history to life in an inspiring way, or however you describe me. The point is, you didn't word vomit every single thing that's ever happened to you. Instead, you had an idea of what's important and used evidence from your past to support that idea. That's history. In this episode, we're going to discuss how the sausage gets made and why with great power comes great responsibility. Oof, 2 cliches and we're not even at the intro. Well, a cliche a day keeps the doctor away. And there's 3. I'm Dr. Danielle Bainbridge, and this is Study Hall U.S. History to 1865. Let's jump in. It should go without saying, but we use history all the time. And basically forever, humans have looked backwards to understand the present. Questions like, who are we? Why do we do things the way we do? Are often answered by telling an origin story. An origin story is typically the starting place of a group's history, and often it contains themes and traditions that are passed down through the generations. All sorts of countries, cultures, clubs, and groups have origin stories. For example, the Iroquois tell the story of the Sky Woman, who was banished from the Skyland and then assisted by birds and animals who helped form the earth. Based on that origin story, it's no surprise that the Iroquois have a deep and great appreciation for nature. After all, without nature, there'd be no Iroquois people, according to that origin story. We at Study Hall have our own origin story. It was a sunny but brisk spring day when 2 superbrain brothers joined forces with one of the best institutions of higher learning in all the land to share knowledge to anyone with a half-decent internet connection. The Iroquois origin story, unlike Study Hall's, is an example of proto-history. Proto-history can be a little confusing, so hang in there. Essentially, proto-history is the history of a culture or population that hasn't developed a written language yet. For example, ancient Chinese historians wrote about the Yamatai of Japan, chronicling their history before the Yamatai had developed their own writing. Because it existed well before writing, proto-history is a much older form of recording the past. Also, proto-history, like the origin story of the Iroquois, isn't quite like the history we're familiar with today. That's because history based on fact and evidence is a much newer phenomenon. Nonetheless, humans still develop our own origin stories as history. That's never stopped. For example, think of the American story of George Washington and the cherry tree. Most Americans are probably taught that story as early as elementary school. Washington takes a hatchet to his father's cherry tree. When his father confronts young George about the tree, the future president utters those famous 5 words, "I cannot tell a lie." Except that story itself is a lie. It's a myth developed to highlight Washington's supposed great moral character. As a result, Americans are supposed to similarly hold up high traits like honesty and integrity and look for those traits in our leaders. A group's history functions in much the same way. The stories we share about the past highlight the themes and traits we deem important. In this course, we should ask ourselves, what happened? Why did it happen? How did the past shape the present? How confident are we in the answers of 1 through 3? We have to ask that last question because, as we'll learn, we argue over history because we don't always know what happened in the past. Records are incomplete, language is entirely lost, and whatever records do remain, it's entirely possible that the author made a mistake or purposely changed the facts to fit their own narrative. Because of that, history is constantly changing. It's subject to revision, reevaluation, and recontextualization. We'll also learn that history is, a lot of the time, a series of choices. For example, where would you begin the timeline of your story of watching this video? Would you begin it when you typed YouTube into the search bar? Earlier than that? When you decided to search for educational tools that didn't cost an arm and a leg? Even earlier than that? When you first read a book about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad and decided you loved history? What about earlier than that? When your parents made your existence possible? We could even start the story as far back as when Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web or when Ada Lovelace developed the world's first computer program. So many options. And each one is a choice. See, someone must decide what from the past is discussed, how it is discussed, and sometimes, just as telling, what is left out. These choices are the product of examining the available historical evidence and then interpreting and arguing about that evidence. How you came to watch this video might be fairly inconsequential. But what about when choosing where to start telling even bigger events, like the formation of the United States? You may not realize it, but a lot of who we are today is shaped by what we believe is important to our history. This is especially true in choosing where to begin American history. What if you were asked to tell the American story? Where would you begin? The signing of the Declaration of Independence? The forced migration of African slaves? With the indigenous societies that populated the continent for hundreds of years before colonization? Why would you start there? If, for example, we start the history of America with the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, it might be because we believe the Founding Fathers are central to the American story. Or if we start the American story with the forced migration and enslavement of Africans to Jamestown in 1619, it might be because we want to emphasize American history as one of racial and social struggle. Each of these starting points is a choice, and each one has its own distinct set of consequences for how we interpret the past. They might be infused with our own contemporary or personal biases, elevate certain groups or people, and alienate or completely ignore others. Just like we choose to end this course with the end of the Civil War, we must choose where to begin this course. And when we aren't 100% sure of something from the past, we just have to do our best based on the available historical record. That means potentially changing our understandings of the past to fit what we now understand to be true. For example, say a general historical theory is that ancient indigenous people in present-day New England never traded with the cultures in Mesoamerica. If we found a piece of pottery in an Iroquois longhouse resembling one from Teotihuacan, then we'd have to rethink that initial theory. And that's okay. That's how history progresses. We might think of history as a house that is built brick by brick. And just like a broken pipe might shake the house's entire foundation and force a remodel, new historical interpretations and arguments are made that require changing the way we think of the past. In this course, we'll begin our history of the United States with the Native American societies and cultures that flourished well before colonization, some for thousands of years, and established the first human communities, institutions, and cultures on American soil. Then we'll examine the convergence of indigenous communities, colonial populations, and enslaved peoples in North America in the 15th and 16th centuries. We'll look at how European imperialism impacted America's expansion in the 17th and 18th centuries, as well as the rise of party politics and infighting that ultimately led to the Civil War. As we make our way, ask yourself, what choices about this course have been made? Why do we start at the point where we do? Why highlight the people, places, and events that we do? Each is a decision that reveals as much about the present as it does the past. If you close your eyes and think of the US, don't start with an image of a map of the US with Hawaii and Alaska tacked on. That's not our starting point here. Instead, think about things like the Chunky Stone, Clovis Spearhead, and Naya Skeleton. These are the artifacts and traces of a civilization that existed well before Pilgrims, Wall Street, or the territory turned country turned state that is Texas. By the end of this course, you'll not only have a thorough understanding of American history to 1865, but you'll also have the tools to make your own decisions about what stories are spotlighted and how you tell them. Even if Grandma's Facebook post isn't the one you'd like to highlight. Don't worry, we won't tell her. Thanks for watching Study Hall U.S. History to 1865, which is a part of the Study Hall Project, a partnership between ASU and Crash Course. If you like this video and want to keep learning with us, be sure to subscribe. You can also learn more about Study Hall and the videos produced by Crash Course and ASU in the links in the description. See you next time.